Coming to you live from the planet of Mandalore, it's the Movie Change Up Podcast Disney Plus Weekly Review, where every week we go around and we break down this week in Disney Plus. It's a self-explanatory title, which is why the title is so good. If you've seen our show before, you know exactly what we're about. If you haven't seen us before or listened to us or however you're consuming this content, basically what we do, like I said, we go through and break down this week in Disney Plus. We break down some of the big releases, some of the small releases, and then maybe we'll flashback and talk about something that's relevant to what our podcast is doing, or something that's maybe relevant to an upcoming release, or maybe just, hey, we discovered this thing, maybe you should check it out. And so Tristan, what have been your thoughts on Disney Plus this week? It's another kind of slow week. There's been really one release.
Yeah, you say it's a slow week, but it was a big release. You know, a lot of conversation around there, a lot of debate around the release, a lot of hype and attention. So it's going to be a fun one to talk about. But yeah, we have some exciting stuff to talk about this week. It was a good week this week, Joe. So
Yep.
I'm happy to talk about. You know, we got some Nick Cage representation on the show this week. So anything that can give me a chance to talk about Nick Cage, I'm always here for it. So yeah, I'm very hyped going into this. And yeah, Nick Cage and a very exciting episode of Book of Boba Fett to talk about, if you can call it that.
Yeah. You and one of the co-founders of this podcast network, Johnny Mitchell, aka Johnny Dupe, are doing a podcast, kind of a retrospective on Nick Cage's career, called the What is the name of your podcast? I know it's a play on his film.
Yeah, it's called the Unbearable Podcast on Nicolas Cage's massive talent.
There we
go.
go.
Play on his new upcoming movie. We're going through talking about the career of Nick Cage, and yeah, celebrating that with National Treasure today. So it'll be fun.
All right, and before we get to that National Treasure topic, why don't we start with the big ticket topic of the day, and that is the Season 3, Episode 1 premiere of the Oh wait, nope. This was just Book of Boba Fett Season 2 Season 1 rather, Episode 5. Basically, plot of the episode: Mandalorian's back. He's got the Darksaber in a big bad way. He's learning to use it. He's working with the Armorer. He's working with Pelimoto, who people know from her appearances on the first 2 seasons of The Mandalorian. Fun character, and kind of this duality of these two kind of maternal figures in his life, talking to him, giving him these different perspectives, leading him on his path. And ultimately, at the end of the episode, Fennec Shand approaches him about doing a job. He's like, I gotta go see first, because the armor melted down his spear and turned it into something for Grogu. We're not 100% sure what it is. Some people are speculating it's chainmail. Other people are speculating it's like a little Beskar necklace that the ball from the ship, he's going to put that on and give it to Grogu as something to remember him by. But either way, I'm pretty sure we're going to see Grogu next week. What are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on this episode overall?
Look, the show is called Book of Boba Fett, and it's a little weird that they had this random offshoot episode, and I'll talk a bit about some problems I have with the way that this is placed in the show here, and I could nitpick that and say, oh, why is this here? Why is it not in Mandalorian? Where's Boba Fett? But for now, I just want to be like, Joe, this was so cool. Yeah. Was this not awesome?
That's just a great, and you'll bring up those points, and I've thought about those points and reflected on those points, and I think I can defend those points fairly well. But yeah, this episode was awesome. It was badass, shot well. Bryce Dallas Howard, shout out to her. One of the things I've loved about her episode
Hilarious.
Is there's always a kind of a throwback, a reference to a classic action movie. I believe in her first one, we had the kind of Jurassic Park vibe with the AT-AT, or ATST rather, crawling or walking through the trees with the red eyes. Gave very much a heavy T-Rex and Jurassic Park vibes. I believe in her episode in Season 2, there was a moment that was heavily Jaws inspired, because I think she had the episode where there was the thing in the water and it busted through. And now in this episode, we get the Night of 1,000 Tears or whatever, and it's very heavily Terminator inspired, so I can't wait to see what other movie she's going to pull from for her.
Yeah, I think she did a great job with this episode, and she had a lot to really tackle because she was not just, oh hey, the Mandalorian is back. She had to do this kind of like stealth premiere of Mandalorian essentially, but she also had to answer a lot of questions and connect a lot of things. Like there's whole sequences here where Din's essentially like, oh, who is Bo-Katan? And then they get like the whole Wikipedia reading of the Bo-Katan backstory, and like she had to really make a lot of a little, I guess, here to to juggle here. And I also love the new planet and the way that she established it with that kind of tracking shot following Din through, and you really get a sense of the place and a sense of the people, and
Mm.
it really looked unique too. Of course, it looked like a Halo
Yeah.
from the Halo show that's coming out, now the games. But yeah, it was a really cool. And I think for me, why this episode felt so refreshing was because it was such a step apart from what we've gotten before. Not just because it's a different character, but it's also just like a totally different place, totally different tone, and feel like it felt like very different. I've complained about being on Tatooine too much, and this whole show has been on Tatooine, but it was very cool to get out of Tatooine, not just out of Tatooine, but to a planet that we haven't seen before, and in a type of planet we haven't seen before. You know, it doesn't feel like anything that would be on Earth or anything. It doesn't feel like they shot it in like California.
Yep.
You know, it feels like a totally alien world. So yeah, I really enjoyed this as a piece of Star Wars media. Really great action. I thought the opening sequence was really kind of thrilling. Seeing him fight with the Darksaber in live action was something I never thought I would ever see, and it was very cool. And you can see that Din is ruthless without Grogu. He's kind of gone back to like his very cold look. I can take you in the easy way, or I can kill you. Kind of. He says the same line he said in the
Yeah.
beginning of
I
Mandalorian.
can
So you
bring
get
you
the
in
sense
cold,
that
or I can bring you in warm, or reverse that. But yes.
yeah, she had a lot to balance with his arc. You know, he had figuring out what's changed. Where is he at now? And he's not at the same place we left him. He seems a bit more broken, a bit more like lost. Not that Grogu's gone. Like he's fallen back into his old habits. So I'm curious. You said, "Oh, are we going to see Grogu next week?" And I wonder if we do, or if that's kind of left for Mandalorian season 3, or like what is it? What does this show look like now? Like, do we go back to Boba Fett next week and it's just a normal episode of like mid-tier Star Wars TV, and or are we kind of like bringing it all together now? Is this kind of going to be like an Avengers level crossover thing where the next 2 or 3 episodes are all going to be like huge? Because I know next week is, I think, Dave Filoni's episode.
Yeah, we have 2
So
episodes left. Dave Filoni's directing the next one, and Robert Rodriguez is directing the finale. I think it's gonna be one of those things where my guess is the next episode opens with Din Djarin going to Grogu, and maybe Luke's there, maybe he's not, but he's kind of seeing like Grogu's in the middle of training and Grogu's where he's supposed to be for now. Like Grogu's definitely coming back, but I think this is more gonna be like just a maybe for like the casual fans of like Grogu's not completely gone. Grogu will be back, but he's where he needs to be for now, and I think Din will learn that lesson, give him the chainmail or whatever it is as something to remember him by, and then Din will go help Boba Fett.
yeah, I'm really curious how this plays out. And one thing I really liked about you mentioned how you think he's going to kind of like now be a part of the Boba Fett team, because it was essentially like he's getting recruited, and then you have this kind of offshoot episode. And I really do enjoy those kind of offshoot episodes and shows like where they're like, oh, we're kind of at the height of our dramatic tension and our core story, so we're gonna have this like episode towards the end where we do a whole flashback or a whole dream episode, or it's like a random character from the background. We have their story in this episode. You know, I love when they do that kind of break in the tension and the break in the kind of the the break in the plot and the pacing. So I really do enjoy that kind of risk that they took for this episode. Even if I think I'll talk about some of my flaws afterwards, but I think I like the risk of it, that they they had this secret too that no one really knew that this was going to be entirely an episode of Mandalorian. Essentially, you know, they
Yeah.
had this essentially a stealth premiere of season 3. You can make it. It's like they'll say it's not, but I would call this like a stealth premiere of Mandalorian. You know, we're back at it. It's literally called the Mandalorian Returns or whatever.
The return of
you
the
know,
Mandalorian kind of, I think, play on what they're building with the Mandalorian and also with, the return of the King, which I think is kind of the direction that the Mandalorian is headed, as well as obviously the return of the Jedi.
I also thought it was very cool that he had this ship from the prequel kind of Republic era ship, the Naboo era
Yeah.
ship. I really like the idea of them all kind of bringing these eras together into one thing, and I
Mhm.
feel like the prequel era in particular has gotten shelved a lot by the movies of Star Wars recently. It feels like it's kind of that redheaded era where they're like, oh, we can't really talk about that, and so it's kind of cool that they're bringing that in and to see that ship kind of out into the like. I mean, we saw a Republic ship pulled over by X-wings, and it was like never something I thought I would see with Boba Fett or with Mandalorian in the driver's seat. Like, what a strange, bizarre collage of things.
Could you imagine after you watch the season one premiere of, the season one premiere of The Mandalorian, if I told you, hey, at some point, not even in this show, there's going to be a Boba Fett show, and at some point in the Boba Fett show, this character is going to have the dark saber, and he's going to meet, like not meet, but like going towards Luke Skywalker, like going to where Luke Skywalker is, in a ship commissioned by Luke's mom. Because that's what's happening now.
Yeah, very bizarre. And I like the new ship too. I've always liked the very tense and small kind of ships compared to the big bulky kind of like his Razor Crest was like this bigger kind of thing. I like the idea that it's like just this guy in a cockpit, like barely floating in space. It's very scary, and I think it's my favorite Star Wars ships are those very condensed kind of ships. So I like the look of it, and I've always liked the look of those Naboo sleek era prequel era ships. So I like the pull here. I wonder if this will be his ship for a while, or if they're going to go back to essentially having another Razor Crest by like next episode.
Yeah, I've thought that, and I think other people have given some thoughts on like what if we go like what is it, the Spectre, the Ghost and the Phantom kind of vibe that they had on Rebels. Like maybe he has a bigger ship, and then that ship has like a landing port or something that this smaller Naboo ship fits into, and so maybe he's like, oh, I gotta go do this one little thing, I'll take the Naboo ship. Oh, I gotta be in this big gunfight, I'll be in my bigger ship.
Yeah, I'm excited to see it in action too. It'll be cool to see if he gets some like space battle with it or something, because I'm sure that like those small little ships that go so fast they can fly around between everything. Like it's a much different action space than like the Razor Crest was. So it'll be interesting to see how they shoot it and how it looks.
Yep. One of the things I wanted to bring up is just kind of thinking like the future of Din Djarin is, because I think I messaged you about this after we watched the episode, but there was a reference again to the Mythosaur and a thing about like, oh, Mandalore will be, rise again when the Mythosaur rises or something like that. And then later on, he's told like, oh, if you want to, be seen as a Mandalorian again, you got to go back deep into the caves of Mandalore. And so my full-on theory that I'm 100% convinced of is because the Mandalorians are not like the Jedi. Like the Jedi, like go into this cave, it's all about self-reflection and discovery and all that. It's not what the Mandalorians are about. I'm pretty sure going into the cave is essentially a death sentence, and the fact that you could even survive this cave, because they're all about fighting and all of that. That if you can survive this cave, you're essentially like should be a Mandalorian, and I think that's what it is. It's kind of like walking the plank for a pirate. Like okay, you're going down here, and I think he's going to emerge out of the cave riding what was believed to be extinct Mythosaur.
I think that would be awesome. I mean, they teased Boba Fett riding the Rancor, so I think that would be a kind of a cool escalation of it. Like it's even bigger than you thought it was going to be.
Yeah, could you imagine like season 3 of the Mandalorian? Boba Fett's riding his Rancor. He feels all cool and badass, and then out from the horizon, I don't know. I assume a Mythosaur can fly. I don't know why. That's always the vibe.
It sounds like it.
The Mythosaur just swoops in with Din Djarin riding, and it's like 20 times bigger than the Rancor.
Yeah, we need to get a new cool animal. We gotta get a creature in there because Grogu's not going to be around.
Yep.
Give him like instead of the tiny little cute guy, give him like one of the big kind of fluffy giant type characters where it's like he looks big and scary on the outside, but he's really just kind of like a gentle giant. That would be a really fun, totally different twist on the Grogu thing. Yes. Where Grogu's like this little tiny guy that secretly is powerful and dark.
Yeah. Similar in a way to Daenerys Targaryen's dragons, where like they can fight, they can mess shit up, but they're also kind of like giant dogs.
Yeah, I think that would be really fun. We got to get some cool creatures. I love the creatures of Star Wars, so give me some more creatures. And I thought that was kind of cool about this episode too. Is that when you got out to the other planet, you really felt like, look at all these different people, all these different aliens. Like it felt like they were just repeating like a bunch of CG graphics in the background. It was like they're actually putting some effort into making it look different and making the characters look different.
All right, I want to hear some of your negatives. We've been positive. I know you have a lot of negatives as far as like maybe the placement of this episode or this episode compared to the other ones. So
look, I see. I told you that I do like these kind of bottle episodes where they take it and they say, okay, we're going to spin off now for one episode and give you this crazy thing. And one of the more divisive ones I can think of is in Stranger Things when they had the random 11 episode at the end of season 2, and everyone was like, "Oh, what's this going on?" But I was kind of a fan of that because I thought that Stranger Things season 2 earned that and was at a point where I was into the characters, into the plot where a break felt earned. And when I look at Boba Fett right now, I don't feel like they earned this break because I'm not invested in the characters, I'm not invested in the plot. They haven't like. Why does this feel so much bigger and better than anything they've done so far in this show? It feels to me almost like they wasted my time for a bit, and now when we look back on this show in a few years, no one's going to really talk about anything other than this episode, and this isn't even a Boba Fett episode. Like, I wish they would have given this cool of a budget, this bigger of a cool of a thing to Boba Fett. Like maybe give us a flashback where he's in the prime Boba Fett era. We really got to see him do something cool, go on a mission, and like really go all out Boba Fett action. But we didn't get that, and maybe they will give it to us in the next 2 episodes. But I have a feeling right now that this episode is going to be what the Book of Boba Fett is remembered for, which is an episode that Boba Fett's not even in and doesn't even have a rippling impact in. Like, it's not like he does something on the outside of the episode and then it kind of comes back into him and hits him. Like, this feels strange. And I mentioned that it feels like a Book of Mandalorian season 3 premiere randomly shoved into the Book of Boba Fett, and that could work if the Book of Boba Fett was working in the first place. But to me, it feels like this random thing they threw in here to kind of hold up the fact that the rest of the show is kind of not that great.
Yeah. All right. So now for my defense, because I get your points and I understand a lot of your points, and not necessarily long. Because a lot of art and all that's like vibe and feeling and all that. But from what I've read, the last 3 episodes were the ones that had the biggest budget by far. So I think as far as like the look and feel and all of that and like the quality of the show, I think the final 2 episodes are going to match this one. And I also think potentially a lot of the plot we garnered in this episode of him finding a ship and like going for Grogu and all of that, I think if it plays a bigger part in the final 2 episodes and is important to what goes on, I don't think it'll feel as disjointed. Because, like, in a rewatch, we know, okay, like, this happens, which leads to this thing in the finale, so, like, we kind of had to watch it. But I also think from a thematic standpoint, I think a lot of it does line up, because a lot of, like, the lesson, or not, like, the lesson, but the motivation for Boba Fett we learned is him, like, knowing you need a family, and you can't do anything alone. Cut to Din Djarin, who kind of had a family, and now that he's lost that family, he's back to kind of square one, back to how he was as a bounty hunter before, and he still kind of longs for that family. And I also think, in a way, I mean, this isn't exactly tied directly to the show, because it's nothing they've really talked about so much, at least in the Book of Boba Fett. They've talked about it in End of Mandalorian Season 2 after Boba Fett was introduced. But basically, Din Djarin and Jango Fett are very similar type characters. You know, both foundlings, both, you know, raised in the Mandalorian culture, both eventually became bounty hunters who wear the Mandalorian armor. And so I think there's, you know, kind of a tie in that way, which is why I think, in a way, Boba Fett was willing to help Grogu, because in a way, Boba Fett and Grogu are kind of one and the same, raised by, you know, because of the fact that their quote-unquote fathers are the same guy, essentially.
That makes sense, and I do think there's connection. Like, I think the tone and the themes of Boba Fett do carry into this show here. Like, this doesn't feel like it's totally off base. Like, it wasn't like Boba Fett was this really stern, tense mob drama, and then all of a sudden there was this crazy, like, all comedy episode or something that was in the middle of it. Or it feels like this is in tone with like the slightly darker thing that Boba Fett was trying to go for, where it's like, oh, we're gonna be kind of like the underworld version, and this feels like Mandalorian, but a step a little bit step darker, a step into the underworld, a step outside of the norm. So I do commend it for that. I think the the themes do tie together, and I never thought of the connection, literal connection of them having like a father figure of being the same thing, and it kind
I
of
will
works. But
say, one question I have: if the quality, right, like if Boba Fett, similar content, similar story, and everything, but it was just better, and you weren't enjoying it more, would it bother you so much? Like,
no, I think it bothers me not necessarily that it's this random offshoot, but the fact that it feels like they put triple the
yeah,
effort into this than they
yeah,
did to the rest of the show, and it feels very much like. And I think if the show was better, it would feel like we've earned this a bit more because I would be more invested and I would be more like ready to see what happens next. And like when they left me with that kind of peak tension last week, and then they kind of like okay, now let's take a step back for a second. I didn't feel that peak tension. I didn't feel like, oh, I really want to see what happens, and then you kind of get this through line. And I also think they may have done a better job and a better show of making this feel like it connects to the theme of Boba Fett. Like, sure, it's a different character, but it should connect to the same kind of
yeah,
core theme of the show itself. And I think the problem is that the show itself doesn't really have a good idea of its own
yeah,
theme. Like, it feels kind of confused of what it is about.
yeah.
So
I
it's
get
hard
that.
for this random spinoff thing to also be about that because the show feels like it's not really about much.
I get that. Anything else you got to say about Boba Fett?
No, I mean, it was a great single piece of Star Wars media. I do think I'm going to go back and be watching this one a couple of times because it's a fun kind of random, cool thing. Like, I think this show maybe would have been better in hindsight if it was like a 3-part thing where they said, okay, we have this whole hour of one thing, this whole hour of one thing, and this whole hour of one thing. And this episode, as much as I liked it, did make me kind of start wondering about like different ways I could have done this a bit better.
Yeah,
But all that being said, yeah, I had a great time with this episode, and I'm really, really curious to see where the next two go because if it does really tie to this one and really up the ante and feel like, oh, I didn't waste my time for 3 episodes to get to the actual show that I was waiting for,
yeah.
if they actually can come and tie it all around together, I think it could be really fascinating to see how they do it. But yeah, this was in the end a great single piece of Star Wars media, but not a great episode of this show.
I get that. All right, so our next topic, National Treasure. If you've seen it, you'll love it. If you haven't seen it, you should watch it. You'll love it. It's essentially, the best way I would describe it is Indiana Jones meets Mission Impossible. It has a lot, it's kind of the topics and kind of focus that Indiana Jones has, but more of the tone of Mission Impossible minus kind of the big action set pieces. There is action in the show, but it stars Nicolas Cage as Benjamin Franklin Gates, who comes from a long line of treasure hunters because his like great grandfather, played by Jason Earls from Hannah Montana fame, was told like this secret, like this first clue in this treasure hunt that was created by the Knights Templar and kind of hoarded by the Knights Templar to keep it away from the British. And Nicolas Cage's family has kind of been seen as like crazy people in the academic community for believing in this treasure, and Benjamin Franklin Gates, played by Nicolas Cage, is on a mission to prove that his family's not crazy and to prove that, this treasure's real. Spoiler alert, it's a Disney movie. Treasure's real. And then cut to the sequel, National Treasure 2, Book of Secrets. And it comes out that another one of Benjamin Franklin Gates' ancestors during the time of the Civil War may have been a co-conspirator in killing Abraham Lincoln, and obviously from the opening scene we know that's not true. And this time it's tied to another treasure, one of the Native Americans hidden somewhere in the Americas, and Nicolas Cage and his crew go on a mission to prove that his ancestor is in fact innocent, and they have to do so by finding the hidden treasure. So yeah, it's a fun franchise. Definitely check it out. What draws you to this franchise, Tristan?
I mean, there's 2 words. There's Nick and then there's Cage, and that's what drew me back into it. Of course, I have a plenty of nostalgia for this. I watched this when I was a kid and when it came out. In particular, the first one I watched all the time. But yeah, the second one I also watched a lot. And I remember having a great time with these as a kid, and you think, oh, okay, they're kid movies. I liked it when I was a kid. They can't possibly live up to any level of my memory of what they are, you know. So I think I went into this watch this week thinking, okay, might be nostalgic for me, but how good can they actually be? I haven't seen them since I was a kid, and I watch them now, and I'm honestly very, very impressed by it. I think it's a really good action adventure, and I think of some of the action adventure stuff Disney does now, like Jungle Cruise and movies like that, and they're fine, but they lack so much of the ambition and so much of just like the heartful fun that this movie is. Like, I think this is very much a good time, and it looks like a high budget blockbuster. Like it's a PG action movie from Disney, and you'd think by today's standards that would give you like something very forgettable. But I think this is very high effort and very well shot, and it's not going to change. It's not going to be like the most thematically complex thing, but it's going to be a very, very fun time. Uh, and I had a great time rewatching them. And one of Nicolas Cage's iconic performances, he's not totally unhinged of the Nick Cage that you might know him as. He's very much like the cool, collected, straight man version of Nick Cage in this, which is a different take than we're used to him now. If we're used to seeing him in like Mandy and in movies like that today, where he's very much off the rails and unhinged. This is much more of his like leading man days, you know. And this was probably the peak of his career, so it was fun to watch like the peak of his commercial success, his blockbuster career right here for this podcast, knowing that I'm watching so much of his other movies now. But yeah, I had a great time with this. I was really impressed by it. I expected it to be really mediocre kid movie, and I thought it was one of Disney's better live action movies, at least in the last. Like you think of stuff after this, and I can't think of much. Like of course, the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise went on at the same time as this, but between this and that, what has Disney done since that was anything to the level of those two? Like those are some really like ambitious franchises.
Yeah, as far as like the non-Marvel Star Wars stuff. But yeah, I mean, I think it's one of the last like original like live action family film franchise. I mean, it's definitely a family film. I wouldn't say it's for kids or it's for adults. I think anyone, from 5 to 95 can go in and enjoy this movie.
Yeah, it weirdly feels like a movie that's not made today. I know it's easy to say that for like every kind of movie, but it does feel like these mid-budget new IP movies with like a actual big leads and actual good directors, and it you don't necessarily get that because it feels like all of the money is going into like these uber huge known IP blockbuster franchises, or it's going into like the really small indie kind of circuit. So it feels like a time capsule. Early 2000s, you got Nick Cage is like the leading action hero. It feels like a moment in time.
Yeah, it's like how would you even pitch that movie today? So we have Nicolas Cage is our lead. He's kind of this Indiana Jones meets Ethan Hunt type character. And then the other people in the movie, Diane Kruger, who at the time 100% unknown, no one in America knew who she was. We also have Justin Bartha. A few years before his appearance in The Hangover. Again, no one knows who he is. We have Jon Voight, but again, it's like 2005-ish. No one gives a shit about Jon Voight anymore. And then we have Sean Bean as the villain, who at that point in time, I guess, was coming off Lord of the Rings. So that was probably. I'm sure if you look at the first National Treasure poster, the two names on the poster are Nicolas Cage and Sean Bean, right?
Yeah, I'm sure it is because Sean Bean was still kind of riding the high of the action hero days, or the GoldenEye days. Yeah. But your poster really is just Nicolas Cage with a giant, serious-looking Nick Cage. So they were banking on the Nick Cage name right here.
Yeah. All right, so I have two topics I wanted to talk about. Topic number one, we're obviously getting the National Treasure Disney Plus series. Hopefully, anyways. Fingers crossed that it comes through. It could always fall apart at any moment because they haven't started filming yet. So the first one had 90s kind of action star, early 2000s, Sean Bean. Second one had Ed Harris, another kind of prominent late 90s, early 2000s. And I believe the National Treasure series is going to be a female lead. So I'm thinking we need like a female 90s, early 2000s star. And I've got it down to like 3 names that I would root for of being the main antagonist.
All right, give me your names because I have a couple ideas.
So I have Sharon Stone as an option.
It's a good option.
Jennifer Jason Leigh as another option. who I think could make a fun villain and kind of maybe be a career resurgence for her. She had a little bit of a one after what was that Quentin Tarantino movie from a few years ago, The Hateful Eight. She
The
had a little
Hateful
bit.
Eight, I really like that one. She was good in that too.
Yeah, she had a little bit of a career resurgence after The Hateful Eight. And then also my final pick, not quite 90s, a little bit before the 90s was her peak, but Sigourney Weaver as the other.
That's a good pick.
Who
All
are you
right, so
thinking?
I have three picks. Try to go for very different vibes here, you know. And you mentioned the female lead, so I wanted to kind of go the opposite direction. Like if you have the cool female lead, you got to have like the stuffy white dude villain, and who kind of goes unhinged and by the end. And that version is going to be played by Hugo Weaving. I think
Mm-hmm.
he fits into the '90s, late '90s, early 2000s if you got the Matrix, and I think when I
And
watch the
Lord of the Rings
Matrix.
connection with
Oh, of
Sean Bean.
course, Lord of the Rings. When I think of the Matrix, I think of like but he got more and more zany in his performance by the end. And like the last movie, he has that scene where he's in the kitchen with the Oracle. He's just giving this huge, ridiculous laugh. It's become like a gif that you see online of him giving this really unhinged, crazy looking laugh. And I see those moments, and I think he would be a really good, fun villain for like this kind of franchise that's just slightly escalated, you know, because it's franchise is just very much a little bit larger than life, but not totally bizarre, ridiculous. So I think he could be able to pull off that pretty well. Another one that I have is a different version of that character, and it's Kathy Bates. I think she would be a fun, totally different version of not like quite the action villain, but I think she could be like the very kind of crazy, kind of unhinged type. So I think she would be a fun pull for the villain. I think of like Misery, where she
Yeah.
played the villain in there, and she had a bit of a career comeback with American Horror Story, where she was for a second like being talked about again in that show, but she's pretty much just fallen back into like the camp of Ryan Murphy shows, and like that's it. So it would
She
be
was
interesting to
great in
see.
that movie, the Clint Eastwood movie that came out a few years ago.
Yes, I know the one you're talking
The one
about,
about the
where
guy that didn't blow up the Atlanta Olympics.
Richard Jewell.
Richard Jewell. Yeah, she was great as Richard Jewell's mom.
Don't say Richard Jewell your Oscar picks; he'll get really mad at you.
Mm-hmm.
My last pick is Jessica Biel. I think
Okay.
she would be a fun. I think of like someone who had a career at that point in time, and then like you know back in the era kind of National Treasure, and then is kind of like she's still actively working and stuff, but you're not like, oh, I gotta go see like the next Jessica Biel movie. You know, she's kind of into TV now and that kind of a thing. So I think it would be fun to see her, and I think she'll be able to pull off some of the more action stuff. She has more of the typical like build for action. So I think she'd be able to pull it off pretty well, and she could fit like the Charlize Theron kind of in Fast and Furious performance. And those are my three picks. I think that covers kind of a wide gambit of where they could go with it, because we don't really know what their vibe is for the show or what the real we know the basics of it, but you don't really know like the plot or the character descriptions or anything much like that. So
Yeah, I was gonna say also last night when I was coming up with who my picks would be, I had 4 picks, and right before taping, I was going through in my head, and I could only remember 3 of them. After you gave your picks, I realized my 4th pick was Kathy Bates.
we heads think alike, Joe.
We're in agreement. So if they cast her, then we know we're on the right track. And my second topic is one I've thought about for quite a while, and that is that National Treasure and the Kingsman franchise are in the same universe. Now that might sound like crazy talk. However, Bruce Greenwood plays the president in Kingsman 2, The Golden Circle. He also plays the president in National Treasure 2, Book of Secrets. A little bit different personality, but maybe it's different perspective. Nicolas Cage, who's a little crazy at times, maybe doesn't see Bruce Greenwood as crazy as he necessarily is in National Treasure 2, also, or not National Treasure, as Kingsman 2. However, maybe if you're looking at timeline wise, maybe Nicolas Cage ran into him kind of, early in his presidency. In Kingsman 2, we're seeing him kind of final years of his second term. Maybe the job's gotten to him a little bit, turned him a little crazy, turned him a little evil. And I looked, maybe, like, do their names conflict? Is that a problem? And Kingsman 2, he's credited with his like name. I don't remember what the president character's name was. However, in National Treasure 2, he's only referred to as the president. So names don't conflict. And another thing, that's the big selling point. Tristan, I've said it before, but what is the title of Kingsman 2? The full.
Yeah,
The
it's the Kingsman 2, The Golden Circle.
Correct. And if you watch National Treasure 2, Book of Secrets, the group of conspirators who come together, which is based on a real group that did exist in our history, to group of conspirators who come together to kill the president were in fact called Knights of the Golden Circle.
Wow, it's all connected, Joe. You really figured it out.
Yeah, National Treasure and Kingsman, same universe, same over the topness a little bit. One's just more in the kind of the action adventure, and one's more kind of like in the spy type thing. But all I'm saying, in the National Treasure Disney Plus series, I want Eggsy to show up and help him out.
That would be a great crossover, Joe. I do. You when you first pitched it, I thought, oh, those worlds don't quite collide. But as you talk about it, I think you know what they do kind of make sense together. And you know, bring Nick Cage to the Kingsman franchise, I can't imagine what you get out of that because that would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I would watch it. It's got to be better than the Kingsman, which was just okay.
I was not a fan of the Golden Circle, so I didn't even watch the Kingsman. But I'll buy you that they're connected.
Rasputin should have been the main villain. That's all I'll say about that movie. Anything else you want to say about National Treasure?
It's a really good time if you like Nick Cage and you want to hear me and Johnny gush even more about all kinds of Nick Cage movies. Check us out on the same podcast feed you're checking this out on. We got the Unbearable Podcast of Nick Cage's massive talent. It's a mouthful, but it's a Nick Cage show, so I think that makes sense. It's going to be a good. We got the new episode, the first episode launching. Sometime. If you listen to this episode, it should already be out. So go check out the Movie Change Up feed and find it on there. And we're planning to have episodes every month towards the end of the month, going through all the way to the next movie. I'm not the. No, I forgot the title of the actual movie. The one that we punned.
The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent.
The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, the Nick Cage kind of self-parody movie that he's doing this year. So we figured perfect time to cover all this stuff. So if you want to hear us fanboy, check it out.
All right. And that brings us to our third and final topic, kind of light on topics this week. We have The World According to Jeff Goldblum, which is a show Tristan has been watching. Tristan, we're kind of in season 2 right now of this show. What are your thoughts? Is it a show I should be watching? Should I be checking it out? I enjoyed the little bit I've watched of season 1 and season 2, but I've never done a full deep dive, watched every episode yet. So should I be?
I think this is certainly the best of Disney's kind of like reality TV type shows where they're going to bring in a celebrity and like have them do like a basic reality TV premise. But the fact that it's a huge celebrity kind of makes it more elevated. So you have stuff like this, you have stuff like Chris Hemsworth, you have stuff like Will Smith's show and Gal Gadot's, and this one holds together way more. And I think if you like those kind of shows, you like pleasant, they're like 20-minute episodes, not even that. Sometimes they're easy to throw on. I watch them while I'm editing something or writing something or working on something, and they're fun to watch up and watch Jeff Goldblum be really entertaining. And of course, he's like oozes his charisma and just clearly enjoys everything he's doing. He's such a very genuine and kind of like open to the world type person, and he entertains me just watching him talk about stuff, whether it's like a motorcycle gang, something you wouldn't necessarily think that Jeff Goldblum would click with, but he, of course, clicks perfectly. He has one where he talks to like magicians and he goes to the magician's world, and another one with like universal monsters and kind of gets into like the deep-rooted psychological fears of monsters. And I thought it was a really kind of great watchable show, and if you want to be entertained, you want to just see Jeff Goldblum be charismatic and learn a little bit about different subcultures, even though it might not blow your mind, you're going to get some interesting tidbits about little subcultures of the world, and very joyful and positive at a hard time to exist too. So if you want to see the world in a positive light through the shining eyes of Jeff Goldblum, I think this is a great comfort watch.
All right. You're definitely pushing me to watch it. I'm definitely curious in checking it out. I've seen it before. I have a general vibe of the show. I've seen probably 4 or 5 episodes at this point, but like I said, I just haven't ever gone through and been like, okay, I'm going to go watch all of the episodes I've missed now.
Yeah, I definitely think it's worth watching, and he has some great stuff. And I just like the fact that you do get those little tidbits of information that he very much comes to it from this positive light. And a lot of shows like this where they're trying to like profile these very specific groups of subculture, they almost always have this tinge of mockery, where it's like, oh, we're making fun of the fact that these people are really into this weirdly specific thing. When you think of like news segments, they always play this like goofy stock music over the fact where it's like this tinge of it's kind of stupid that they like this stuff. And
Mhm.
Jeff Goldblum comes at it like, it's incredibly cool that you like this. It's
Yeah.
like very much awesome that you are so into this.
Yeah.
And it's heartwarming even when you're like, I don't care about motorcycles. I'm not a car person. I don't care about anything in that realm of reality. But when he's talking to guys who are really, really into it, you catch the contagiousness of that joy. So I really like this a lot, and I can't wait for more of it. I'm hopefully make more of this show. So
Yeah. Yeah, he kind of reminds me of another show I have yet to watch that's number one on my list, and that's Ted Lasso. And there's a scene from it that pops up on Twitter all the time where Ted Lasso quotes Walt Whitman, and he says, be curious, not judgmental. And I feel like that just perfectly sums up Jeff Goldblum, especially on this show. He's just like not out there judging anybody. He's just super curious about whatever all these weirdos are into.
yeah, I love that about it. Very positive, very much like in love with humanity, and I think that is something that more and more feels necessary as the world seems to just get worse and worse in certain ways. So
Yep. Sorry, it's a late night over here. It's 1:06 a.m. at the time of this recording, so
we're very dedicated to our Disney Plus coverage, though.
I just am busy tomorrow and I didn't want to do it tomorrow, so
Work keeps us up late, work in the love life.
yeah, that too. All right. Anything else we have to say about Disney Plus this week? I know we have another episode of Book of Boba. Oh, quick news. I don't think we ever talked about this. Mary Elizabeth Winstead cast in Ahsoka.
I think it's awesome. I think she's a great actress. She's one of those people that elevates even random stuff that she's in. One of those people that I seek out her when she's in things. So, yeah, a great pick. And yeah, the interesting world life collision of Mary Elizabeth Winstead and Ewan McGregor back in the same franchise once again.
Yeah,
So
they've been in Birds of Prey together, and now this. So yeah.
and of course Fargo as well, which I thought was really good performance in both of them, and that was a turning point in their lives. So it's interesting that they would collide again in Star Wars. Everyone's in Star Wars eventually, it seems. Star Wars and Marvel.
Yeah. All right. I think that wraps us up for today. And just two final things. Number one, if you think banning the book Mouse is a good idea, you're dumb. And also, without further ado, goodbye.
Hey, thank you for watching the movie.